Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
Hey, Alex, we spoke earlier and you wanted to start by reading a poem named Defeat by a man named Khalil Gibran. I think it was the great value of difficulty, right? You want to start with that?
That's right. I'd love to, but I have to tell you about an experience that I had with one of your episodes with Doug Holliday, and I'll try to connect the two. Okay, so that episode was powerful for me. And if I read this poem and I start a trend of folks reciting poetry on Revenue Builders, I feel like my contribution will be complete. But before, hopefully that becomes a thing.
You're opening up new doors, Alex. You're opening up new doors.
I'm here for it. So there's a few things that I took away from Doug Holliday's podcast, and I'll give them to you, and hopefully they're helpful for the audience. You all mentioned the bravery to be yourself, Cap. I think you spoke about this. Everybody has a story. The most successful people own their story. No heroes, no victims, but make space for people to share their story. That stuck with me in a huge way. People, McMahon, you said people are attracted to the broken parts more so than anything, that vulnerability, not the statuesque version, as you put it. Right. And although admittedly that's pretty cool from time to time, but it's the broken parts that people can gravitate towards, relate to. You all mentioned the highest characteristic of a successful leader is the vulnerability and the authenticity. And I personally did not operate that way for a long time. I was quite transactional in my relationships. I was like, am I adding value or am I not adding value? How do I change that? Or what is it about this person where they don't perceive the value, and just the idea of you all, not the idea, the reality of you all talking about these topics was so powerful. And then finally, I have two daughters. One of them is 19. She's in college. She was a rock star athlete. I mean, ran circles around the kids around the track, an incredible soccer player. I completely ruined it. I was one of those parents. You all went on about this topic. I lived vicariously through what she was doing on the field because she was phenomenal. And you spoke about the dynamic where the parent needs to give the kid, and as my dad would say, God, some elbow room to do their work and to experience it in the way that they want to experience it. And we have an opportunity as parents to learn from that. My goodness, that I think I pulled over at that point and reflected. I think a lot of these things are so valuable. That episode was so valuable. So I would encourage anybody to please listen. And this idea of authenticity and vulnerability is something that has served me as a leader most recently. And here goes my segue into defeat, because I think that the authenticity and the vulnerability can sometimes come from difficulty or challenge. And I think this thing is really captured. But I'm only going to read the first and the last stanza so I can leave something of suspense for the listeners, right? They can go, go in the middle. Sure. All right. So I built the suspense. Here we go. Defeat, my solitude and my aloofness. You are dearer to me than 1,000 triumphs and sweeter to my heart than all world glory. Okay, that's the first stanza. I'm leaning in. Here's the last one. Defeat, my deathless courage. You and I shall laugh together with the storm, and together we shall dig graves for all that die in us. and we shall stand in the sun with a will, and we shall be dangerous. Legit. You know what I mean? I just want to run through a wall when it's framed that way.
So powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what I take from that is, at least for me, is I learn more from my defeats and bad experiences where I failed than I ever learned from my successes. You know, it really teaches you something, not only about yourself, but about the situation and how you handled it and how you might handle it differently the next time. And it is those defeats that I think really make a person, living through the really hard times and the lessons learned from those difficult times.
I'm with you. And that again, the holiday podcast, I thought about that. I was listening to it and I pulled over and I thought about defeat and I was like, this is great. And I always say this, like, there's an immeasurable amount of people that would love to have my bad day. Right. Like I'm fortunate. I am blessed. And so I don't want to put too much emphasis on it, but my goodness, the learning opportunity with difficulty is big, and it applies in this profession. And I find that poem to be super inspirational.
Yeah, well, you have people that are working for you and they're having difficult times, and you can see that they're suffering. Going to them and telling them about some of the difficult times that you had along the way and how you handled it, you know, resonates with them, because it does show that you have broken parts. It does show that you're vulnerable, and you're showing, you know, authenticity by approaching them and spending some time to share those stories with them. Because otherwise, like you said, if everybody thought that Alex Varel just automatically got to the position that he's at today and he never had any problems, it's pretty difficult to approach Alex Varel. Pretty difficult. But if I think that he struggled along the way and I'm struggling along the way and he gives me some advice and tells me I'm doing great and he's going to help me along the way and help me through this difficult situation, I'm probably never leaving Alex Varel either.
Yeah. I like the topic that we're on, is this impermanence of life, which is, and it came up with Holiday a couple of times, is the nothing's going to stay the same. And I think people that struggle with change really suffer in life, and change is not easy. And I think it's easy. I think it's a little easier to do once you get a little older, because you have more defeats and you've realized that none of it lasted. And so the wisdom that you're sharing with the audience, I think, is so powerful. Like, I today listened to that Simon and Garfunkel song where it starts off with "Hello, darkness, my old friend." I never understood that when I was young. And I absolutely understand. That gives me chill bumps just to say it. When that song comes on and they say, "Hello, darkness, my old friend," it's like, I actually believe that now. Like, when the dark time comes or the struggle comes or the defeat comes, it's like a friend, because you know that you're going to get carried to a place that's greater than where you are in the current position. So I really appreciate you bringing that to light, buddy. And it just struck me as like, I wish that for everybody. I didn't have that when I was younger. I didn't have that perspective. And if I could have, I think I would have been so more blessed to realize that, you know, the defeat, the darkness, the challenge, the brokenness, those can be friendly, big time.
And it makes you a better leader too.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, I love it.
Holy, what the heck are we going to talk about now, boy?
Well, can I tell you something?
Started, brother. Just getting started.
I know. We jumped in right there, and I love it. And thank you for, you know, creating the space to be able to do that. But I genuinely think, and I may have had a little bit of a hint at this through a conversation before the episode. I mean, we're all on Zoom right now. You all have an unbelievable podcast. I can see this thing being filmed in like 8K high definition, Dolby Atmos audio recording in a walnut mahogany gold trim studio. I think there's just huge things ahead. I'm grateful to be on the Zoom arrangement, But Mike, and even a reality TV show with the two of you, I just think there's big things ahead.
I like it.
Big things.
We could do everything you just said. We could do from McMahon's summer house,
Yes,
dude. He's even got a walk-in fireplace, bro. We could do some amazing things with the walk-in fireplace.
Now, if anybody really listens to what Cap is saying and thinks that people want to walk into a fireplace,
But then they put your name up there and say John McMahon walk-in fireplace. Makes sense.
Nothing else needs to be said. Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah. So, Alex, that home defeat, if we tie that back to some of the stuff with Doug Holliday, talk to us a little bit about what that means to you as far as, like, I think he said smarter to my heart, some of those things. What is that? Touch on that a little bit before we move on.
Yeah. So it was, what you were talking about. It's like, though, that difficulty, the lessons of, learning is, I think I got this from you or Carlos in the early days of MongoDB. Learning is in the difficulty, right? A Cap. I mean, I've held on to so many of those lessons from both of you, and it says that. It says, like, my defeat. You feel alone in that. My solitude, my aloofness. You are dearer to me than 1,000 triumphs. If you can reframe the experience of going through difficulty, you'll find that to be, as he says, sweeter to your heart than all world glory. And I mean, the rest of it will just, it's interesting because it's a poem about reframing the value of difficulty, and it transforms into inspiration, where you could read something like Roosevelt's Cap. What's the name of
The Man in the Arena?
Yes. Yeah. That'll make you want to run through a wall. But here it is, it's a little bit inverted. And then it says, you and I shall laugh together with the storm, right? If you can see the value and the challenges, the difficulty that you're having, you can bring some levity to it. And we're going to dig graves for all that die in us. And we're going to stand in the sun with a will, and we shall be dangerous, right? We're going to fortify through that. And I love that because I know that there's a lot of vocations and trades and professions that come with a lot of difficulty. And so the mindset matters. And I think, I just think it's a great reminder. And then Holiday, the idea of maintaining genuine relationships. I've spoken to, just as an inspiration from that episode, I've spoken to like 5 or 6 folks that I used to work with at MongoDB and other places in the last 30 days. I think that was released on December 12th. And I've spoken to John Siebert, Alan Chabra. I've caught up with Dolly. I texted with Dave Goodmark, and I did that inspired by this idea of maintaining these relationships as I get older. I've been in the game for 21 years. I'm 44. I drink a lot of water, so I know it may be confusing on camera. Yes, I am 44, but I was so inspired to reconnect, and I'm grateful for that part of it too.
But also, don't you think that, we never know when these defeats or setbacks are going to come, but the more that you experience it in the light that you just described, I think it makes it easier when you come into a setback and you don't know your way out, to think to yourself, I know there's going to be a way out, and I just have to persist. And I know I'll find a way out of this thing. Versus collapsing and just saying, I give up. I don't know how to get out of this thing. It's that will to survive or persisting that gets you through it. And then when you look back, you say, it actually wasn't that bad. At the time, it seemed really bad, but now it doesn't seem that bad. And there were some really great lessons learned from that. I mean, that's how I've experienced it.
Well, you guys have heard me say, like, I think, I know, Alex, you've heard me say, and I think it's come up on the podcast before, Johnny, when we're talking to Doug, is like, it's an incredible thing that we were designed with something called the psychological immune system. And the problem is, like, we have all the capabilities that we just talked about. The problem is the not average, but most of humanity does not know how to tap into it. It's something that was given to us by God. And it works on the same principle as our immune system. Like, so your brain has a psychological immune system. When it hits a dark place, hits a difficult patch, it is trained, it is built to be able to look for antibodies. Like, where else have we seen this before? Has my body or my brain seen this before? The answer is yes. Okay. It's never as good as we think it's going to be, and it's never as bad as we think it's going to be. And so we have all the capabilities we need. Unfortunately, most people, I had to learn how to do it the hard way. Most people do not know how to tap into it. It's beautiful. Like, we're designed that way. We're designed to get strength. That poem is actually how we're designed, Alex. It's amazing.
I love it. I love it. There's an
talking
actor.
About lessons learned, and you're a first-time CRO.
Yeah.
Are you willing to share a couple lessons that you learned? Because, as a brand new CRO, I think a lot of people that I've spoken to that had worked for me, and then they finally achieved that CRO spot, were like, wow, it's a lot different than I thought it was. In fact, they used to call me and say, how'd you do this for 20 years? So can you talk, are you willing to share a couple lessons learned as being a first-time CRO?
Absolutely. And if I get long-winded, wave your hands and like I'll stop and we can move on, because I feel like I've got a few. So just holler at me if it becomes a bit much. But I would say the first thing that comes to mind is having a proper mindset of what you're about to take on, because there's a deep responsibility and accountability associated with the role. And that accountability and responsibility is something that I think you got to embrace. I love it. I like the idea of having the accountability to, the customers, the individuals, and the teams, and making all of them wildly successful. And so I think, the other thing to be mindful of with that mindset is that you're going to partner, in most cases with the arrangement, you're going to partner with an executive team. You're going to interact with the board. You really want to understand, who those folks are. Can you work well with them? The senior leadership team as well. Like, where's the value from the board? Where's it coming from you? How are you going to work so well with the executive team, and being super clear about the expectations for the role? Because I do think it comes in varying forms, and the scope of responsibility perhaps can vary. You can be a CRO of a smaller kind of go-to-market org, less cross-functional, or you can own more of the estate, so to speak. And all of that comes with a ton of accountability. I'm lucky. My boss is Ewan Blair, and our board is phenomenal. And I'm not just saying that on the most certain chance that Ewan's going to hear this episode, but I really wanted to understand how Ewan and I were going to work together, knowing that I was going to have this kind of ultimate accountability to top line growth and go to market. The strategy, the culture, the execution. I've got a tremendous responsibility in that, in partnership with the executive team, the senior leadership team, and the board. And so knowing what my controllables are for strategy, culture, execution is really important. I'm going to make one other comment and I'll pause. When you're in the CRO job, it's a huge advantage, because in most cases, people want to meet with you, right? Inside of the company, outside of the company. So what a huge advantage to be able to listen, to go on a listening tour, and you're going to make decisions. And in some cases, in fact, it's probably guaranteed, if you're doing something, you're going to make unpopular decisions, but you have an opportunity to make informed decisions. And what an amazing advantage to have a position where folks want to come to you. If you give them the space and you make the proper space and bring you the gaps, the vulnerabilities, the lowlights, if you can really create an environment where they feel comfortable doing that, and you just get to listen and be super informed before making decisions that affect execution, strategy, and culture. I'll pause there.
What was the biggest aha, though, of all those, and maybe even another one? What was the biggest, I didn't think about that?
There's a couple. I think the spine from pre-sale to post-sale and unifying customer success. So there was an opportunity in my situation to either not have customer success roll into the CRO or to have customer success roll into the CRO role. I was very adamant about having that as a part of my org. And for me, having that spine, that continuity from pre to post sale, and having unified goals where, and I'm not saying they would do this without me, but I didn't like the idea of a group that's so critical to the company's growth and the customer's experience, perhaps going off in a disparate way and creating their own goals, and then me finding a way to try to connect the two. So I feel like the org design for the CROs out there that either need to partner really well with the chief customer officer, or if they have the opportunity to have CS under their umbrella, that was a big aha moment for me, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like
you were contemplating the what ifs if I can't control that. If I like, this topic is a really good one because first of all, not all companies view it that way. There's a ton of roles that have CROs or chief commercial officer or what have you, and they have it separate on the back end. And I think that the way you just described it is really having reverence for the customer and the customer experience and the company, not because you're looking to build the title. Because a lot of times I ask people, well, why do you want that? And they'd be like, well, if I don't have it, and they talk about all the negatives. If I don't have that, I can get screwed over here and I can get screwed on this. And I'll be like, that's a different answer than people saying, like, I believe that I can create a common message for the customer. I can create common goals for organizations to get great customer outcomes. And I want to commend you because you first looked at what does it mean? Why am I thinking I want to have it? What will it provide for the customer? And that's so much more thinking than most people go, I'm not taking the job unless I get CS.
Right.
Right. And they just want to make sure they're protecting themselves from getting screwed.
Yeah, I wasn't as concerned with this idea of building a fiefdom or having a headcount that was, this size. I mean, the Zscaler job was huge, right? That had plenty of headcount, and I'm thankful for that because it certainly prepared me for kind of all this kind of cross-functional ownership. It was more about what you said. What is the proper design that creates a natural mechanism for unified goals that are going to benefit the customer? They're going to fuel growth. And we're going to train together because of the org design. We're going to shake hands and contract on a customer engagement process and a customer engagement model. I don't have to worry about you going off and and again, not that somebody would do this, but it's a dramatic way of putting it, like going and having these glossy types of goals that are incredibly attainable. And then you come back to me and look, the partnership's great between sales and CS. So, it's a privilege, and I'm lucky. I want the same folks that are going to inherit the land deal to be in that opportunity as early as possible and be arm in arm with the account executive to think about that second, third, and fourth use case before we even sign the first land deal, right? And when you've got the proper designs and models for that, it's really powerful.
Talk about you never presented to a board before, or maybe you did, but as a CRO now, no one ever told you, like, this is how you present to the board. Any lessons there on what you learned in presenting to the board or what you should present to the board?
So I was fortunate. I've had on a smaller scale a couple of opportunities before to present to the board before Multiverse. But but for the most part, this was far more intimidating. Have you ever seen our board members? They are highly accomplished. And so, I'm translating the nervousness to excitement. Like that's the first thing, right? Like, right. So it's mindset. I get to do this rather than, oh crap, look at who I'm actually going to present in front of. That's extremely intimidating. So get excited, prepare and coordinate really well with your boss, right? Because, it's you want to get as much value from the board as you possibly can, but I want to have a unified front and belief in like what we're doing and what we're representing to the board, and make sure that I also have an opportunity to expose some of the vulnerabilities and the gaps and get feedback. But the preparation is critical. The mindset is critical. I ate some breakfast. Just a quick story, like before my first meeting in front of the board, I'm in my office set up in Dallas, and I knew I was, the opening of a board meeting usually runs much, much longer than, so if you're on deck and you're going to go second, present to the board, and there's kind of a closed door opening, in most cases, if you're doing anything that's worth anything, that's going to run a little long. So be patient. But I'm eating breakfast, and I had some oatmeal, and it got caught in my throat, and a few of the board members remember the story, and it jammed me up right as I was going into my presentation. But I reached for some water, so I had a little bit of a rough start. But they're a valuable audience, and preparation's everything.
So fasting before the board meeting.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I get a little hangry, like the Aretha Franklin commercial. So I do need some substance in me before I go and pitch. But yeah, just no oatmeal. No oatmeal.
The other thing, Alex, that happens with a lot of first-time CROs is they don't see themselves on the same level as the CEO. So they don't give real, honest feedback to the CEO as far as what they see is going on in the business. And sometimes they have to be coached that they are part of the executive team. They are responsible for revenue coming into the company, and they have to look at themselves as peer to peer with the CEO. Now, the CEO obviously gets to make the final decision, but they have to give open and honest feedback as far as what's going on. Otherwise, you're hurting yourself as a CRO, you're hurting the CEO, and you're hurting the company.
Yes. Yeah. I think
that's a big step for people the first time when they step into that CRO role.
For sure. That's a huge lesson. I'm naturally, I'm not too shy. And I think like one of the things though that I needed to make sure was that, like I mentioned, the relationship with your boss matters. The relationship with the executive team matters. And so as you're preparing for this meeting and you really want to get a ton of value, I think it's really important to expose not just the highlights, but get into the gaps and the vulnerabilities. I am the type that operates a little bit better in tension zones. And there's a partner from Sequoia who wrote about this, and it helped pin some vocabulary against kind of like this style of leadership and operating that I guess I carry. And it is more operating in the tension zones. I feel like that's where more happens rather than kind of starting in the middle and in kind of a softer way. It's rather like stretching and finding great things. So with Ewan, and yes, you're right. Like if you're a CRO, carry that confidence. Don't be afraid of the tension zones. If you see something, say something, like say the thing, bring it up. Don't be passive in that regard. And hopefully you've done your diligence to understand that you can have that type of protected relationship with your peers and especially with your boss. If you're coming from a good place and you care deeply, you should be able to get into disagreements and tension and get a bunch of value out of that.
Yeah.
Johnny, are there any other things that you're thinking of there? You bring that up a lot on the same level. And I would say that probably the people listening, very few people believe that. Like when they're in that situation, they find it hard to believe that they're on the same level. Like what are some things, and let's say you do believe you're on the same level, but you don't believe the CEO thinks that you're on the same level. Like any advice there on because that conflict happens all the time. At the end, somebody has a card that says, well, do you work for me or do I work for you? And that's the lowest common denominator of leadership. But any advice there?
Yeah, I mean, I've had to coach a lot of people through this because they've actually, they call me with problems that they have. And then they say that, and then I say, well, have you told the CEO? No, I haven't told him yet. And I'm like, well, why haven't you told him? Well, I don't know how he'll take it or any of that stuff. And I think, you are the CRO. They put you in that role. You're part of the executive team. You have to look at yourself as someone that's responsible for giving accurate feedback to every member on the executive team, most importantly, the CEO, and see yourself as a partner to the CEO so that, you can help the business. But like I said, the CEO is the CEO and they can listen to your advice and they can still decide to go a different way. Now, I think you have to really feel like this is important. And if I don't let it out, I'm going to wind up hurting myself, because the last thing you want to do is not give honest feedback, let it go 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. It becomes a bigger and bigger problem. Next thing you know, you're going to lose your job. And when you look back, it's because you never gave honest feedback to the CEO. They're counting on it. Like I said, they may see it completely different, but you better find out up front that they see it completely different than you do. And maybe they just look at you as like, well, you're just another sales guy and I'm the big CEO and I'm the big tech founder or whoever they think they are. And if that's the issue, maybe you're doing yourself even more of a disservice by not talking about the issues that you see in the business. Now, when you go to the CEO, I don't think you go in there with 10 different things. You go in there with the thing that you think is most important to help you and your sales force and the company move the ball forward on revenue, and see if you can work on that. Don't go in there with 10 things, because then it sounds like you're just complaining. You got to go in there with one very important thing and see if you can resolve those issues together and see if you truly have a partner in the CEO. That would be my
resonate, Alex?
It does. It does a lot. I think I'm really lucky too, because, I remember in the early days of MongoDB, Dave would always kind of reinforce he couldn't stand when somebody was passive aggressive, right? If you agree with it, but then you kind of walk away and roll your eyes, And so I saw that. And I think we were really great as a group in like saying the thing, right? Where do we disagree? And so that kind of planted the idea in my head. And then Dolly was really great from the beginning in terms of set expectations around what the role is. How can we engage with each other? How can we contract with each other? He was really great about, hey, tell me what I'm not seeing, right? Like suggest solutions, and the same with Ewan. He's very, very open to that. But John McMahon, what you say about pick the one or two things that are really, really important to solve for, that are going to help the company do well and help you do the job really well. I think that prioritization is huge. And the other thing I'd say, I don't know if you all would react to it, is it's what kind of CRO role are you signing up for, right? Because I think there's so many opportunities, and there's the CRO title, and they're just going to perceive you as a sales leader. And that's your swim lane. That's the lane that you got to stay in. You do sales and do it really well, but you're going to carry this CRO title. Perhaps that's not as much of a thing, but I think, again, expectations around the job and where you're going to add value and being able to collaborate with the other executives, provide feedback. It's important to cover that stuff up front.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about how you keep learning and adapting. You've been doing this a long time now. How do you keep learning and adapting to grow your mindset as the environment, as the company, as the competition, all of that changes? How do you keep learning yourself and adapting? Talk a little bit about how you do that.
Well, first I need to fall on the sword. I kind of light a candle for my bosses the first 10, 15 years of my career, because I don't think I was very I was very obsessed with learning, but I don't think I came across as coachable as I could have. And I reflect on that just to remind myself that the beginner's mindset is so important, especially now more than ever. And so homage to those folks that endured. I mean, I'm really passionate about the profession, and I genuinely feel like I'm doing now in my career for the last 21 years, I'm doing kind of what I was groomed to do. And I love that. So I have this natural obsession with it, which is helpful. The way that I channel that energy and that obsession around others is something that's evolved. And so the beginner's mindset for me, I can't remember who said it, but I heard this description that, like, the current times right now, there's a pandemic of certainty. Like, everyone is so convicted and certain of their positions on things. And I'm kind of guilty of this in some way too. In the sense that I have unmovable positions around my family and around principles, but I remind myself I don't want to participate too much in the pandemic of certainty when it comes to the profession. I have a lot to learn. And even just listening to the Doug Holliday podcast, and as I mentioned, like talking to 5 or 6 people and talking shop with them and learning what they're doing, that has been, really powerful for me. And I'd also say that, I absorb your podcasts, McMahon, your book. I also go even very simple things. Like, I will go, Amazon Kindle has a free library and you can type in sales or sales playbooks, or how to SaaS sale, something like that. Right. And I come upon these free books, and like, I'll read QSL. I don't know if anybody calls it that, qualified sales. I read.
QSL. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll read QSL, and then I'll go and I'll kind of juxtapose it next to something else that I found. And I'm just trying to gain more vocabulary that I can put into practice. And when I have an opportunity to be in front of either one of you, back in the day, and Cap and I still keep up, I take feverish notes, and I just review them so that I can commit them. The science says that you should handwrite them. I've moved to typing them, but I'm the practice of what I've learned and putting that into practice is something that I'm very intentional about. So hopefully that gives you a good idea. It's books, it's podcasts, it's conversations, it's note taking, it's deliberately putting it into practice.
I think you also learned, at least I did, I learned from everyone around me, no matter what level they were. I'd see somebody like a rep, first line manager, second line manager, they'd say something or do something. I think, oh my God, that's brilliant. Like, I got to stuff that in my bailiwick, and I think if you really don't think like you've cornered the market on knowledge and you're always open to learning, you learn from everyone around you too. If you really, to one of your earlier points, if you truly are listening, that really helps.
That means a lot to me. We've got a team in Europe that is, in both the United States and Europe, but the team in Europe where the core of the business is, and I'm over there all the time, they're brilliant. And a lot of them are earlier in the career, but they've got an unbelievably high ceiling. And I will take some of the ways that I suggest we might approach something, and then I'll say, hey, tell me, like, what's your reaction to that? How would you do it? The most brilliant things that I have implemented have been a result of some of their ideas. And I try to give them all the credit in the world, but it's amazing what smart, driven individuals who don't have a conditioned layer of thinking or approaches to a problem statement, what they come up with. And I smile big here because I sincerely, just in the last couple of quarters, have instituted things that have come straight from them and perhaps unconventional.
Yeah, good.
What about the topic of an operating rhythm? What I've seen very, very difficult in the job is when you get into that CRO role, everybody in the company wants a piece of you. Like, The marketplace wants a piece of you, but everybody in the company wants a piece of you. And left to the natural devices of normal corporations, you could be in company meetings your entire career in the CRO role. So how important is it, or what advice do you have on an operating rhythm that allows you to be able to be available and create space for what you just said, going into local markets and being able to listen to people on how they're reacting to things, making sure you're talking to customers, making sure you're giving feedback internally back to product, back to marketing, or what have you. How important, or how any advice you have on the operating rhythm of a CRO?
So deliberately budgeting time for skip levels is something that comes to mind that's really helped me, especially in the last in the last two roles, the Americas at Zscaler and in this current role. So I will have a minimum of number of skip levels that need to occur in each region or area so that I can get feedback and learn what's happening at the street level. And I don't
help people understand what you mean by skip level.
Sure. So I'm fourth line. I will go down to first line leaders, and I'll say I need a top performer and I need two bottom performer, right? Folks who are doing well, but two who are not doing well. And I'm going to skip level, meaning I'm going to skip the third, the second. I'm going to skip you in terms of like getting their feedback. I'm going to go straight to them. I'm going to go straight to the IC level, the individual contributor level. And rather than, hey, give me someone to talk to, I could put those parameters around it, right? Top performer, two who are not doing so well. And I will do that across X amount of first line leaders. So I get 3 per, and I budget the time to talk to those individuals so that I can get the highlights and the lowlights. And it's interesting what I learn from the folks that are ramping, that are new, and have feedback about their experience. We hired them. We made a big investment. We were convicted about the decision to hire them, which is great. And I get so much, for example, just from a well-defined kind of quota targeted number of individuals that I need to speak to within a certain time frame. And that has helped me tremendously. That's on the go-to-market side. So it's not just the AEs, but it's the CSMs. I've got a rev ops. I've got enablement. I've got channel. I've got implementation. And talking to those ICs, I mean, I tell you, if I do a 2-week blitz and I keep it all on a spreadsheet, so I take my notes, right, and I find what's actionable, and I get back with the leadership team and I synthesize all of that. I learn so much from that. Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, it helps big. And that's just one aspect of it. That's just internal people. Then you got to get the same from customers. You got to get, you're the CRO. So you got to get some strategic view. Right. And operating rhythm's no joke, man. You get eaten alive in that role if you don't have a good operating rhythm.
That's right. I think even on the customer side, the reps or CS, they want to put you in front of the happy ones, the ones where they're going to sing the AE's praises, perhaps, and I really get more value out of talking. I mean, I love talking to happy customers for sure. It's a beautiful part of the job, but the ones that are not as satisfied, right, and going into those difficult situations from a deal perspective. I do get asked to help kind of try to perform CPR on certain opportunities, right? Where it's like, hey, come get in here, parachute in here.
The miracle cloud. Then a miracle happens. Call Alex.
Yeah. Wrap the Superman cape on.
Yeah.
Right. But I think you got to be really clear about who you want to talk to and not just leave it entirely up to, hey, can you give me a customer to talk to? I want to talk to someone that's happy. I want to talk to someone that's not happy. So.
But Alex, you also talk about transforming your organization from, I think what you called it, a superstar mentality to broad-based success mentality. What do you mean by that?
So There is, I think there's a lot of great companies as I understand it, right? I'm just obviously one perspective on this. I think there are great companies out there that, are doing super well by just crowbarring deals and just getting them done and doing it on the backs of, you count on one or two hands, superstars kind of spread around in the hubs, right? You got some powerful stuff happening in the New York metro area. You got great stuff happening in London, maybe some great stuff happening in the Bay. And that certainly is a way to grow. But I do think that, you can always count. I'll stage it this way. You can always count on human fallibility, on errors, right? Those are to be expected, especially in the early days when you're, forming the team, your genetic engineering, you're forming process. And so I like to look at the errors as consequences of the system, not necessarily causes of the people, right? I don't first jump to like hire and fire my way out of the problem and try to have this ultra dependency on crowbarring deals or superstars. I want to ask myself, like, what is it about my arrangement of talent, my systems, my enablement that I can be responsible for that error as a consequence? And so I think that's a mindset that I try to take and the whole idea of taking this crowbar superstar deal culture and making it more of a scientific approach is looking at it from a team first perspective and having the team and the process at the base of the pyramid as the foundation rather than the individual superstar or the deal centric view. So it's what is it about the team and the processes that I can enable? And I love the superstars, by the way. Like how fun is it to talk to the people that are out there really killing it, making it happen? But it's all about what can I replicate? What can I make repeatable across a common methodology and get the team inspired by this scientific approach that's only going to make them better, doesn't eliminate common sense. And being very deliberate about that, I think is the start to scale. It's the start to broad-based success.
Trying to replicate that and trying to repeat that is something you're constantly going to be asking yourself how you do that. It's so difficult, especially as you scale in the organization and you're recruiting so many new people. How can I replicate this? How can I continuously, repeat it? It's very difficult.
Can I give you four? I'll give the listeners like four things to think about.
Love it.
Here. Okay. Because I feel it's like the everlasting question of how do you do that? How do you clone your superstars and make it broad based? It sounds unbelievably idyllic and it is. It's something I still deal with day in and day out. And fortunate to have that challenge. You're looking for, in my opinion, iterative improvements over short periods of time. You want to make sure that you have data-driven decisions where the measurability creates accountability. The mindset is team performance over individual performance will create the scale. And then using a common methodology or vocabulary to create the repeatability so that you're super aware of, am I making folks consciously confident, right? There's four things to think about for that transition to a more kind of team-based scientific approach.
Yeah. Iterative improvements in a short period of time. Sometimes what I found is that some people will move and give you those quick improvements, and some people take longer. And but I think the key that you said is that you can see measurable change.
Right.
And what's really difficult is sometimes you have people that can do it in 6 months, and sometimes you have people that can't do it for a year. And then you have to make this decision as to, do I keep this person around that's taken a year to get where other people can get in 6 months? And what I found goes to your point is like, if I can't see measurable improvement on a consistent basis, then I have a different decision to make. But I mean, I've had one person that it was a classic example. The board, the CEO, everybody's like, you got to get rid of this person. He's been here now. 5 quarters, hasn't sold anything. And I wouldn't let the person go because I felt like, well, if I let him go, because I constantly saw improvement, if I let him go, I'm going to wind up recruiting the same type of person, same characteristics, just in a different body with a different name. Stayed with the person. In the 5th quarter, they landed one $1.1 million deal and another $1 million deal. The person's a CRO today. But if I would have shot them or got rid of them earlier, and it was a test of me and a test of them that I, dug in deeply and tried to see if I was constantly seeing improvement, I could have changed their life. Maybe for the worse,
So you saw.
So that's really difficult to do.
Right. But you saw intangibles in that individual, and you saw measurable improvement. And so the drive, the intelligence was there. They were picking up what you were leaving behind. And you're like, this is going to manifest itself at some point, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was taking a gamble, right? Especially when you have that type of pressure above you, right? But yeah, those are some of the gambles that you get to make as a leader, right? It's tough.
What's interesting is like, I just got a flashback, Johnny, of when Grant Wilson and I started Force Management. We were starting Force Management. We came to visit you in Boston, and you're driving that egg or whatever. It was like called like a VW. Remember the SUV, the cool SUV, VW SUV? Anyways, we're talking to you about what we want to do. And you simplified it so well for us when you say, hey, look, for me as a CRO, it's like everything for me is about productivity per rep. And everything for me is about time to productivity. And if what you guys are talking about doing at that time, we were talking about form and force management, like that's an interesting conversation for me. If you're relevant for increasing the productivity per rep and decreasing the time to productivity, that's where I would focus on if I were you guys. And, I just kind of got a flash of that, of all the things we could have talked about a CRO and all the things we could have, like at the end of the day, those were the levers that you were pulling on. Are those still really good levers? Alex, do you see those as levers, as like icons to focus on, if you will?
The productivity per rep and the time
productivity
to
per rep and time to productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I love to break up into cohorts and really look at the ramping time period, the ramp sellers, understand the participation rates. How are they changing? Is there a cohort of, ramping? But I look at the first quarter, the first 3 months, the second 3 months, the final 3 months, if you have a 9-month ramp on your financial model. And like, it is the per rep productivity is huge. I think JP Bolin talked about this with you all. It's like, it's the metric to kind of rule them all. But as you scale, you got to see, is there broad-based success? Like what is the participation rate, right? Not just in ramped, but in ramping. And then have you been able to accelerate the velocity of the sales cycle? So that time to the first 2 wins, McMahon, you talk about this a lot. It's like people want to win. Right? They got to be able to meet the market, but you got to get them to those 2 first wins. And so measuring the time to those wins inside of your ramping cohorts is really powerful too. And then it's all about, what am I doing to enable and unlock all of this? How am I helping to affect a bigger ASP, a faster deal cycle? And all the elements that go into that. There's so many indicators that are the heartbeat of the success, and then looking, 3-4 quarters down the road, you got to be able to do that in the CRO role, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, everybody builds, your CFO and your CEO are going to build a productivity model, and there's 3 main elements in there. It's the ramp time of a rep, the productivity of the average productivity of the sales force, and then attrition. There's the rules of the game. Okay, I got it. It's no more complex than that.
I mean, it really isn't.
How do I do that? I got to hire really good people. I got to train the hell out of them to decrease the ramp time and give them to really good leaders. I got to do everything like Alex said to decrease the sales process time frame and train them again on the elements of that so they can get through that sales process quicker. And if I do a great job at those first two and give them the really good leaders, I probably don't have to worry about attrition so much. But if you can nail down those three, and it's way more complex than it sounds, you're going places.
Love that. I think you did that five-time CRO. Alex, I know you do that in what you're doing. I think that's not an oversimplification of like what's critical, because I've seen it work for both of you.
Yeah.
Really powerful. Hey, I don't want to lose us on this one. We talked about a topic in the pregame a little bit on scaling the business. And you have an interesting philosophy, Alex, on external leaders. And I wanted to make sure people hear that. Like sometimes organizations are either, hey, we like to grow up from within. Very rarely are people saying, yeah, we like to get all our leaders from the outside. Like what is your philosophy on external leaders?
Well, there's tremendous value in external leadership. And I think there's certain situations where you can strike a nice harmony or balance between this kind of promote from within meritocracy and that type of culture. I have seen an over rotation on promote from within. Like you cannibalize all of your ICs are the best ones. You throw the superstars into first line leadership roles and I don't. So I think a healthy amount of that makes a ton of sense. I think it's very natural. In fact, if you understand the ICP, the ideal candidate profile of that first line leader role, realizing that person first and foremost has got to be able to recruit really well. So they got to be able to identify and attract talent, be able to qualify that talent. And then as McMahon said, you got to go on and be able to develop those folks, retain those folks and execute with them. So doing the job really well as an IC, it's going to give you a huge advantage if you know that environment, that selling environment really well, and you have those characteristics of a leader to be able to recruit, develop, and execute. You're going to have an advantage naturally transitioning to the first line role. If you can coach it, right? If you can coach the skill, install the accountability, galvanize the troops. But I really think the most successful promote from within is actually from the first to the second line, from my experience. So I had this over rotation on promote from within, and I paused it for a year because we were just taking our best people, we're throwing them into first time leadership roles. And it became just a bit much. So I paused it for a year. And then I went deliberately to the outside to get external first line leaders, bring in fresh eyes, knowing that my IC layer was developing. They were accruing more time in the seat. We had the culture nailed down better. We reduced attrition. Now I'm like, let me bring some fresh eyes, some outside perspective. So brought in first line leaders. The second line leader externally, I found to be difficult.
In what way?
Well, I don't think it was anomalous because I feel like I've seen this across a couple of environments. If you come in from the second line, and maybe I can get to the story, McMahon, where I called you during the lockdown and I entered Zscaler at a really high level, and you gave me advice of like, okay, I can't get on a plane. Like, how do I, as a high level external hire, like, how do I win hearts and minds? How do I think about this? I've got a ton of notes on that, and it helped me. But let me get back to your question. What is it about the difficulty of acclimating an external second line leader? Well, the second line leader, has an opportunity to help the first line layer recruit, manage performance, because they've got more experience across both of those, right? Managing high performance, managing low performance, helping people exit if that's the situation. The programmatic training of the group, right? If a second line owns an area, the first line is going to be recruiting. They're going to be developing really through osmosis, and they're just going to help people execute, right? Well, the second line can lift up a little bit and look at the competency or the competencies of that area and make sure that there's programmatic training and development of the group, right? When you think about broad base, the second line's responsible for that. you've got to really, in a lot of cases, you've got to really know the business, know the customer, know the market, know the sales cycle. And if you come in at second line and you haven't been through, there's exceptions to this, but you haven't been through the IC of the first line iterations, it's pretty damn tough with those responsibilities that I outlined.
Yeah.
But the third line, I do think there is an advantage and an opportunity to bring in great perspective at the third line, where by the nature of their job, it's a little bit more elevated. And that outside perspective is going to reveal blind spots, and it's more natural for them to find those and cause some growth and cause some impetus for change. That's been my experience.
No, I love what you said. What I really love what you said that's hidden in there, and I want to emphasize, is the segregation of duties between the first line manager and the second line manager. A lot of times in companies, people get promoted into second line, and they're essentially doing just exactly what the first line leader did. They're not doing anything else. And the sales reps are looking, saying, why am I getting called by my first line manager about this deal? And I'm also getting called by my second line manager about this.
Who's my boss? Yeah.
Yeah. Who's my boss? But to your point, there's two things that second line manager has the experience of doing that the first line manager really needs help with. And one is recruiting. How do I really recruit top talent, And number two is assessing the talent levels and the strengths and weaknesses of your current reps, and then figuring out how do we develop those reps. Because like you said, that first line manager is so busy with so much other stuff and doesn't have that experience. And you have to get the second line manager held accountable to those two things, helping the first line manager out with recruiting and then assessing and developing the current reps.
Can I give you something to piggy like QBRs for the second line leader?
Whatever you want. Yeah.
Okay. So AE QBRs.
Yeah.
My humble plea. Second line leaders run the AE QBRs. I see sometimes where the first line leaders try to come in and it's like theater. They try to have these interactions that are supposedly natural while they review a person's business who they spend 12 hours a day with. I think it's really important. And perhaps it's obvious. But if the second line's not leading the AE QBRs and the third line's not leading the first line QBRs, for example, I would highly encourage that. I
love that. Yeah, love that. What about recruiting, Alex? Let's finish up here with talking a little bit about recruiting. What is some of the key traits that you look for in recruits?
Well, I think these will be familiar for you, but absolutely in this order, it's drive, intelligence, and coachability. Underneath the drive, we spoke about this before. I think before we started recording, is just there is I like to really understand what someone's trying to prove or trying to avoid. There are easier jobs in the world outside of this profession. And there are far more difficult jobs outside of this particular profession, but understanding what someone is trying to prove in this kind of current era or time period in life, because it's a lot of time. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of effort, a lot of energy. So why this job? Why this job? Why this environment? Why this market? Why these people? Why do you care about the problems that we solve in this particular market? And why would you want to sign up for that type of role? A drive is just so important. And I do subscribe to what I've learned from the both of you, and the ability to have great rapport and get into formative years with a candidate has been super helpful for me. Those formative years are so influential. They're extremely informative. You really get to know the individual. You get to share your formative years as well. That has just paid dividends for me in terms of identifying really driven people and understanding what's behind their motivation, which I think you have that responsibility as a leader. They've got to be smart enough to pick up what you leave behind. So it's a combination of street smarts and book smarts. That's the intelligence piece, because you're going to train them. The world's going to train them. The customer's going to train them, right? There's a lot to learn. And so there's a clock speed that's required for most of these environments, and that intelligence matters, and the willingness to pick up what you're leaving behind, the coachability, having that humility or humble swagger really matters. So from an intangibles perspective, those are the three that I look for.
Hard for me to argue with any of those.
Right. Yeah. But there's three buckets, and it's the competencies, and then there's the experience. And, I remember Carlos asked me at a dinner before I joined MongoDB. This was early 2015. He asked me at the end of the dinner, he was like, "What do you think I think of you?"
Ooh,
and I was like, "Yeah, I know." And I did too. And that's the first time I've ever been asked that. And I was like, I was playing it back. So what do you think? What do I think you think of me? Okay. I said, well, I'm not like, I think I have it. I said, I'm not a database guy. Like, I don't know the database. And he said, I don't care if you know the database. That's not what I'm hiring for. We're going to teach you that. We're going to teach you that. And in my head, I'm like, let's go. What a mindset, right? And so the point of that story is the intangibles are non-negotiables. You can create an environment that really, fosters those intangibles to thrive for sure. And you can also create an environment that suppresses them. So you got to be careful. But those are things that the experience of life has given them up to the point that you're intersecting with them. The competencies matter. Right. And it depends on the segment. It depends on the sale, but there are skills that are required to do the job, and you'll certainly go and develop the skills and the knowledge. But those are the three buckets. And so I look for that when I'm identifying potential talent.
Awesome.
Dang, Mitt Romney has come a long way. A long way, buddy. We're just going to leave that as an inside joke, Alex. Mitt Romney.
Oh, I love that story. Can I tell one last story, McMahon?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Whatever you want.
And this will be a lesson to the CROs. And then I gotta catch a flight to cross the Atlantic Ocean. And it goes back, and Kaplan and I, I'm so fortunate we keep up, and you've had a huge impact on me, and in so many ways. So I pay homage to you. And then I got to tell this story about McMahon. We're in a room in New York, John, at the old MongoDB office, and it's kind of the VPs and above. So you got Jesse in there, you got JP in there, Dave's in there, you're in there, Carlos is in there, and we're on this topic of SDRs. And I was so passionate about, this is AV in his mid 30s, right? So, and I'm so passionate about having SDRs in the field offices with the AEs, because I wanted them to see the AE job day in, day out. I wanted them to partner really closely with them. And I was kind of suggesting this strongly as a alternative to the hub model of SDRs being in like Austin or Charlotte or whatever. I said, no, put them in the field office. They want to aspire to be AEs, let them live and breathe and clock in, clock out. I couldn't imagine being an SDR in my 20s and not having to go to that office, right? I want to see and live and breathe that stuff, Dan. I was so passionate about it. You were sitting right next to me, John McMahon, and you took your phone. Do you remember this? And you pointed it right at me to pretend like you were filming me. And I look over and I see you got your phone pointing. You didn't say anything. You're just holding the phone right next to me because I was on a tangent, a tirade. And and I calmed down. Dave gave in. He was like, okay, let him have the SDR in the field office in Dallas. Let's just get this kid to shut up. But the lesson here, and Carlos would go pull me out of the room and say, hey, do you know what locking jaw is? Do you know what locking jaw is? And he gives me the pit bull analogy. When a pit bull locks onto its target, you got to get the jaws of life at best, or you got to shoot and kill the pit bull to release the locking jaw. Yeah. And so to the leaders out there that are getting into this kind of ultimate accountability, senior leadership or CRO, and you've got cross-functional stakeholders that you got to work with, and you've got to prioritize your time and your energy, do not die on every single hill. Like, read the room, understand where the priority McMahon is. Like you said, what is the one or two things that you can bring a solution to and solve for, and try to compartmentalize some of that passion and find out really where is the needle mover, because the needle mover might not be the physical location of the SDR.
It sounds like a man talking from experience.
Johnny was filming you so he could, what was the purpose of that? So he could show it to you later, or didn't think he was going to see you again?
No, probably either one. But I think he was just making the point. He just turned to me and he was like, hey, imagine if you're, A, this is glorious because you're on this animated tangent. B, watch yourself. You got you're
on the stage.
Yeah. Like, do this. Do this.
That's awesome.
Alex Varel, thank you so much. Great lessons learned. I'm really glad to hear you're doing really well. You deserve it. You're working hard. You're really determined. You deserve to do well. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, John Kaplan, and thanks to everyone for another episode of the Revenue Builders Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to check us out at forcemanagement.com.